We are back in the Sermon on the Mount. Turn to Matthew chapter 5. I have the wrong scripture on the slide. Great. Matthew chapter 5, 27 through 30. Off to a flying start. That was last week, yeah. So, let's open up with a word of prayer, and we'll get this thing going. Lord, thanks for today. Thank you for these guys. Father, I pray that you'll help us to open our heart to what you have to say today. God, today is a linchpin message. It's the one that we all struggle with. It's the one that we all fight with. So, God, I pray that you'll help us today. Give us this insight, give us wisdom, and Father, give me words that come from you. Thanks, God. Amen. Matthew 5, 27. All right. There we go. You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even your good eye, I think that's funny, even your good eye, even if your good eye causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. I mentioned the last couple of weeks that the Sermon on the Mount is all about religion versus spirituality. People who go through the form and function, but whose heart is far away from God, is people whose heart is close to God and strive to be what Christ wants them to be. Okay? So here is really the next place, and this is kind of what a lot of people deal with. I know none of you guys ever do. I know none of you guys worry about sexual temptation. You're never tempted sexually. It's probably only me. It's just not you guys, because you're perfect and you lie. Okay, and let's be honest, our society encourages this. Our society encourages us to sow our wild oats, and you're a man if you get more notches on your belt than the next guy. And none of that is true. None of that is true. The more, if a woman has a lot of partners, then she's, we call her. Yeah, we call her loose. She's got loose morals. Okay? But if a guy does it, he's a stud. No, he's just as bad as she is. And we used to breed Boston Terriers. And, some guy one time told me, well, I bet any woman I want. I said, you know what? My dog can bet any one of my other female dogs he wants, but that doesn't make him a man. It just makes him a dog. He's got natural impulses in it. Well, look at Red and Panda down there. We have to make sure and separate their offspring from them, because when it comes time, they don't care. They have no conscience. Okay? So it's kind of the same way around. The whole country is more overtly sexual today than it has been in the last 50 years. I mean, they just go on and on. And now we're told that it's not even just gender. Now there's all kinds of other stuff too. Now, it's not just men and women. Now you got I think it's 52 different genders. I don't know. Like I said, the ranch here is simple. If they're a female, they get a pink ear tag. If they're a boy, they get a blue ear tag. We don't let them choose their gender as they get older. It's assigned to them, and if they don't like it, well, they're showing it in commercials now. Oh, I know. Yeah, it's frightening. Living a pure life is difficult today. There's no doubt about that. But it's always been difficult. Throughout history, cultures have had trouble with this. I mentioned during one of our other series about the city in Corinth, where it was considered a religious act to have sex with the temple prostitutes. And when they unearthed the temple, because the temple of Asclepion, you had to make little bronze images of whatever part of you was afflicted and bring it to him for healing. And when they unearthed the temple of Asclepion, all they found were a whole bunch of penises and vaginas, little bronze penises, because venereal disease was rampant. Make no mistake about it, this kind of sin has a penalty. And it may not be a disease. Maybe you don't get gonorrhea. Maybe you don't get syphilis or any of the other kind of things that can mess you up. But internally, sexual immorality takes something away from you. And that's the part that we don't tell kids. We don't tell young people that happens. So I want you to understand this. Sexual temptation is nothing new. People have struggled with it for centuries. I told my grandpa one time, well, Grandpa, you don't understand. It's a lot harder for us guys today, you know. Grandpa looked at me and said, don't be stupid. He said, when I was young, I knew where to find it if I wanted it. Right? There's nothing new under the sun. Men are men, women are women, and yeah, exactly. I want you to realize that Jesus addressed this topic. The whole reason we're going into this is because Jesus addressed this topic. He wasn't speaking to people who aren't tempted like you are. Understand that. The people of Jesus' day were just as tempted sexually as we are today. And we can say, oh, well, you know, the girls dressed today. And you know what? Guys still had trouble with women. Now, granted, it's like, ooh, did you see her ankles? I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what they got turned on about back then. But, okay, these words of Jesus apply just as much today as they did the day he spoke them. So don't get twisted about that. Don't make yourself that excuse. Well, you know, Pastor, Jesus didn't understand what was going to go on today. Yeah, he did. Sin is sin. Temptation is temptation. Okay? So, in Matthew 5:27 through 30, our passage today, Jesus is dealing with sexual temptation. And on a broader sense, what he's talking to us about is sin, the stronghold of sin in our lives. So let's say you're not a person that has trouble with sexual temptation. The steps I'm going to give you today will help you defeat sin. That's why today's message is called Defeat Sin. Because sexual temptation is just a sin. It's a sin like all the other sins that we commit, whether it's lying or cheating or stealing or, you know, anger issues or this or that or the other thing. Sin is sin. Okay, so don't get this twisted. The 3 steps I'm going to give you today are just as good for the sin of lying or cheating in your life as they are for the sin of sex. Not the sin of sex, that sounded. So, if there's a sin that you struggle with, it could be, you name. I'm not going to give you ideas. You name it. A sin that you struggle with. The sin right now. There's a place where the Bible talks about besetting sins. The sins that just happen to us over and over again and always knock us off our feet. What is the sin that pushes you over the edge every time? And for every one of you, it's going to be different. Because we're all different people. Okay? Could be alcohol. Could be relationships. Could be all kinds of things. Things that just knock you off your feet. Okay? One of the greatest things you guys can learn is okay, so here's the sin. What caused that? What caused you to say okay to that? Because you know, whether it's drugs or whether it's alcohol or whether it's a person that you know you shouldn't be with, there's something in you that drives you back to that. And as soon as you find out what that trigger is, you're well on your way to fixing it. So I'm gonna kind of give you some stuff that we can talk about today, okay? So 3 things you can do to get over the power of sin. First of all, look away. Jimmy Carter was running for president in 1975, and did an interview with Playboy magazine. Now Jimmy Carter was like this super Christian. He's the only guy I ever voted for because he was a Christian, and he was the last guy I ever voted for because he was a Christian. Because he's not one of our great presidents. But he admitted that he had committed adultery many times. And I'll never forget watching the interview. And they said, you commit? Yes. I look at a woman with lust in my heart. Yeah. He admitted that he had sinned because he had looked at a woman with lust in his heart. Because that's what the Bible says. For several months after that interview, Johnny Carson made fun of him every night. Every night he made fun of Jimmy Carter about it. But Jimmy Carter was just honestly admitting to a sin that I would venture to say every other adult person has ever had. That is, we looked at somebody and thought, oh, baby. Carter made that statement. He was referring to the verses we're looking at today. Look at verse 27 and 28. You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. the message we get again and again and again today in the media and all kinds of things, and even advertising, we talked about that, is that looking doesn't hurt anything. In fact, I've heard this phrase. My dad used to say this: just because you're on a diet doesn't mean you can't look at the menu. I will tell you, as a former fat guy, now just a chubby guy, that if you're on a diet, looking at the menu is going to cause you to eat something you don't want to eat. Because let's be honest, you're sitting there and, oh man, you really want the pasta salad and the steak and baked potato and all that stuff. And then, but you remember you're on a diet and go, oh, I better have a salad. No, a salad is not the same as steak and pasta and all this. It's not the same. And if you're looking at the menu and thinking, oh, cheeseburgers, I love cheeseburgers. Pizza, oh yeah, I have pictures. Oh, that's even worse. Yeah, I'll just eat half. Yeah, you know you. We used to go to the salad bar place. And say, oh, we're getting a salad, but you're piling it on with all kinds of stuff and then dressings and stuff. It's like a 2,000 calorie salad. Oh, I had a salad for lunch. I'd wash it down with a Diet Coke. The people that say this say that fantasies are normal. They're healthy. I've even heard of marriage counselors that say that fantasies can spice up your relationship. There's some marriage counselors who say that having an affair will spice up your relationship. I talked to Lynette about it. She does not agree. My wife is not on that page. Okay? She just looked at me and started looking at the knives in the kitchen. I said, you know what, honey, you're right. No. But Jesus teaches just the opposite. He says that just looking at a person lustfully is just as detrimental to your heart and your soul as if you'd physically committed adultery. Why? Because that action is a result of what's gone on inside your heart. Right? We talked about it last week. Anger. If you call your brother a fool, well, wait a second. Yeah, because you've already committed that in your heart. I honestly have dealt with people who try to act like, oh, you know, Jerry, I don't know what happened. You know, I didn't mean to have an affair. You know, okay, so let me get this straight. You're just walking down the street, minding your own business. The next thing you know, you wake up and you're in a hotel room with a woman that's not your wife. Well, no, yeah, okay. Dr. Bill Harley, clinical psychologist that Lynette and I follow very closely, great guy on marriage. If you're married, and if you're going to be married, I really, really encourage you to look up Bill Harley, marriagebuilders.com. Incredible stuff. But anyway, he says that every person has a love bank. And so when somebody does things for you, your love bank gets filled up. And eventually you get to the place where romantic love kicks in, and that's why somebody decides to get married. Their love banks are full. Now, when you do things that make them mad, the love bank goes down. Okay? Right now, Lynette's love bank for me, I think, is like minus... No, I don't know. Yeah, we've been married a long time. Okay? So he says that look, if you let these other people pour into your love bank, you're going to fall in love with them. And that's what happens with affairs. You're upset at home or whatever, and you start hanging around with somebody at work and talking to them. The next thing you know, you're really talking to them. Then you're talking personally to them, and they're commiserating with you about your stuff. And the next thing you know, you're in a hotel room, and you're doing things you shouldn't do. Why? Because you fell in love with that person because you let that happen. It didn't happen overnight, so don't tell me that. It happened because you let it happen. It happened because you courted it. You cultivated it. Okay? We need to keep in mind that thoughts precede actions. Thinking about something paves the way for you to do it. This is so important, guys. Scotty mentioned drugs a minute ago. Okay? I don't know how many guys I've talked to from our program in Imperial called New Creations that said, yeah, you know, I just couldn't quit thinking about it. And next thing you know, they've relapsed. Why? Because they kept thinking about it. It occupied their thoughts. It occupied their thoughts. And so that's what happened. To break the stronghold that this has on your life or any other sin, you got to begin by looking away. Divert your eyes. Look at 5:28. But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, there's something interesting about this, and this is where we get. My grandpa used to say this. My grandpa used to say the first look is free. The second look costs you. If I'm in a store and I notice that a woman is pretty, I can say, oh, she's pretty. Okay? Keep moving. Okay, don't stare at her. That second look, the moment I look at her and think, wow. Now I'm in trouble. Now I've looked at her with lust in my heart. In fact, the Greek word for lust, for looks, refers to one who continues to look with deliberate intent. See the difference? If I'm watching TV and somebody comes on the screen and is pretty, oh, she's pretty, okay? But if I keep looking at her and think, wow, look at that. Start ogling her or oogling her, as somebody once said, okay? Now I've got a deliberate intent. Why am I continuing to look at her? Because I'm getting in the mood. Because I'm getting excited. I have looked at her lustfully. With deliberate intent, I have looked at her to lust after her. And now I've got a problem. Now I've sinned. See the difference? Does that make sense? That first glance, you see him and you think, okay. Once you see that, you got to look away. You can't allow yourself to be fixated on it. And it's the same thing with any other kind of sin. If it's alcohol, you can't watch beer commercials. Why? Because it'll kindle up that desire in you. Okay? If you got a problem with drugs, you can't hang out with those guys who do drugs. Why? Because you're going to see, oh man, look at the fun they're having. And by the way, they're not having fun. They're going to wake up with the same problems they had, and maybe worse. Okay? You don't have to give in to this sin. You got to look away. Turn the channel. Get up and leave the room. Quit reading that magazine. Quit reading that book. Quit doing those things. Quit hanging out with those people that cause that. You've got to take control of your life. And you got to do what says, okay, I'm going to walk away. It's the same with anger. It's the same with all the things we talk about as sin in our lives. You just got to walk away. So let me rephrase what you heard earlier. If you're on a diet, don't look at the menu. Right? I'm married to my wife. I have no reason to look at other women. I have no reason to be thinking about other women. Because if I do, I'm running a risk. I'm sinning. It's the same with all kinds of temptation. The longer you look, the stronger the temptation becomes. So look away. Is that too hard? Is that something that's like impossible for us to do? No. It's called self-discipline. And it's a good trait for us to learn and to have. Now it's going to get uglier. Number 2, cut it out. Now this is a very controversial passage. Okay, verse 29. So if your eye, even your good eye, like Papa, you got that one squinky eye. Okay, no, if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Now, let me say at the very outset, Jesus is not saying you should maim yourself. There have been people who cut off their hands because of this verse. No, don't be stupid. Gouge out their eye. I remember I told the story before about a really pretty woman that walks into church, and the evangelist back in those old hellfire and damnation days, this pretty woman walks into church, and every eye in the place looks at her. And the preacher looks down and says, "You guys shut your eyes or you're going to go to hell. God will strike you blind." One guy in the back stands up and he goes, "I'll just risk one eye." Look, Jesus is saying, you got to take care of business. You got to cut this part out of your life. Now, understand, but this follows in with what he just said. What did he just say? He said sin is an attitude of it's not what you do, it's where it starts. Sin comes from our thought patterns. Sin comes from the part of us that wants to do those things. Gouging out your eye won't change your heart. Cutting off your hands won't change your heart. They tried a thing, I think it was in Florida, where they took sexual predators and they either castrated them or they used chemical castration on them, with the idea being that they would never offend again. You know what they did? The majority of them offended again. Because rape and sexual assault, things like those aren't about sex. They're about power. They're about domination. It wasn't a problem with their sexual organ. That was just the weapon they used. Right? It was all in their heart. If somebody attacks me with a hammer, the hammer is just the weapon they used. What was going on inside that person is what caused them to take the hammer to me. So we've got to make sure that we understand that what comes out of our lives, what comes out of our mouths, what comes out of our whole being, whatever we're doing, that comes out of our heart. It comes out of the way we think about things. You got to cut out those thoughts. What Jesus is saying here is get rid of whatever causes you to sin. Cut it out of your life. Whatever it is that causes you to sin, get rid of it. I know men who don't have internet access because they're addicted to porn, and so it's better for them just not to have any internet access at all. Now, these men are inconvenienced. They can't email. They can't look up, the latest scores. They can't watch stuff on TV. They can't watch me on YouTube. That's probably an advantage. Okay? They can't do any of this stuff. But it's better for them to be inconvenienced than to sin. Jesus said it's better for you to go into heaven with one eye than go to hell. It's better for you to go into heaven with one hand than go to hell with both hands. I know people who don't have cable TV because they don't trust their ability to turn the channel. People who won't listen to certain kinds of music because it causes them to be tempted. People who've terminated friendships and romantic relationships because they just can't hold them and not sin. This is what Jesus is talking about. He's saying, look, whatever it is that causes you to sin, cut it out. Cut it out of your life. Sacrifice it. Put that sucker to death. So now when you look at that, is it your hand that causes you to sin? No. Your hand's just the tool you used. We used to tell victims of sexual assault, look, because they always would equate the sexual act that happened to them with the violation they felt. And we would tell them, because then they would feel guilty. And I would tell them, look, if somebody attacked you with a hammer, you wouldn't feel guilty about that. The sexual act that they did to you is just the weapon they used. It all started as hatred. It all started as power. It all started deep in their heart. It had nothing to do with you. You were just the victim. Whatever it is that caused you to sin, cut it out. If being in a certain situation is too tempting for you to resist, avoid that situation. Will avoiding those situations eliminate all temptation? No, but it's a good start. When I was youth pastor in El Cajon, I had a kid in my church. He says, Godsey, I got a problem with lust, man. I just lust. I just see a woman, I lust. And my first thought was, okay, you're 16. That kind of comes with the territory. Okay, but he said, man, he said, really, Jerry? He said, I'm having trouble. I'm lusting, man. Okay. So we talked, we prayed. A couple of weeks later, his mom invited me over for dinner. So she takes me, I go in, I see the kid's room, and I look, and it looks like Bikini Magazine has exploded all over his walls. He's got women, and I mean, I started thinking, oh, I may start lusting here. Beautiful women in various stages of undress all over his walls, and I looked at him and said, I think I figured out your lust problem. And I said, you really want to get rid of lust? Start by taking all these off the wall. Put up a picture of Jesus. I didn't tell him that part. I'm not that corny. Put up a car. Put up a picture of a football player or something, but get rid of all of this stuff. Guess what? The lust problem subsided. You can't. Yeah, picture of Jesus looking at you. Picture of Jesus looking at you. Don't do that. Put a picture of me up there. I told a student one time, I said, here's the rule I want you to live for the rest of your life. Before you do something stupid, ask yourself, would Mr. Godsey be upset if I did this? And if the answer is yes, don't do it. He looked at me like, okay. If you're in a situation that causes you to sin, get out of that situation. If they're friends, cut them out of your life. I know it's harsh. My grandpa said when he became a Christian, he gave up every one of his friends. Both of them. Sure it is. But did you get the feeling that any of this was easy? No, it's all hard. But here's the thing, Scott. Would you rather keep falling into that sin, or would you rather cut those people out of your life for a while? Now, maybe down the road you can restore that relationship. But while you're just getting that all together, and that's the hard, dude, I hear that all the time. Well, I have to give up on my friends.
Just to say, no, I can't talk to you anymore because I'm following this law.
I'm not saying that you can't talk to them, but I definitely wouldn't hang out with them. If those are the people that are doing the things that cause you to fall, you shouldn't be hanging out with them.
No,
call them on the phone. Hey, how you doing, man? Just wanted to check in on you. Yeah. Hey, dude, we're having a party Friday night. You want to come? Nope. Yeah. Hang up the phone. Love you. Got to go. Bye.
You may find that later down the line they've changed too.
Or God may use you as the catalyst to change them. Yeah. Absolutely. But man, while you're still struggling with all of that stuff, you got to cut them out. And I know it's hard. It's brutal. When I was in high school, I was a pretty big drinker. And I had my buddies come to me and say, Godsey, we're not going to hang out with you anymore. Because I guess I got mean when I got drunk. So I went to a party and I watched my friends. I didn't drink anything. I just sat there with something in my hand. And I watched my friends turn into idiots. Just morons. The drunker they got. And so I went to my youth pastor, Terry Cook, and I said, Terry, I got to make some changes. He said, okay. So here I am, high school, and Friday nights, where am I? I'm at the youth pastor's house playing Uno with him, his wife, and his kid. Not exactly an exciting Friday night, but it was safe. It was safe. I had to cut those guys out of my life. It's hard. It's hard. But it was better for me to go to heaven playing Uno than to go to hell messing with those guys. See the difference? I'm not telling you that any of this is easy. Look, the Christian life is not easy. Christian life is gonna cost you some skin. Make no mistake about it. Somebody who said that Christianity is for wimps, well, they're an idiot. They don't know what being a Christian is all about. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done math. I read about an alcoholic who said one key to his recovery was moving to a town in Texas that was dry. You couldn't buy alcohol in that town. Of course, he could have driven 30 miles to the next county and bought liquor anytime he wanted to, and that was the temptation he had to deal with. But he said that it helped a great deal that he didn't have to drive by bars and liquor stores every day on his way home from work. He didn't eliminate all temptation, but he eliminated a great deal of it, and it helped him get a grip on the stronghold that alcohol had on his life. You're struggling with sexual temptation? You got to put yourself out of those situations where you're going to fall. And that means that while you're watching TV and you're watching an NFL game and the Swedish bikini model team comes out for Stroh's Brewery or something, you just sit there and say, ooh. No, you turn away. Just don't look. That's so simple. Cut that out of your life. You don't have to sit there and ogle them. And if it's a real problem for you, get up and walk out. Thirdly, guard your heart. And this is really, really important. Guard your heart. Look at Proverbs 4:23 through 27. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Avoid all perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech. Look straight ahead. Fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. Don't get sidetracked. Keep your feet from following evil. I will tell you that another subpart of this is that if God gives you victory over a certain thing, whether it's lust or drugs or sex or lying or cheating, whatever, if God gives you victory over something like that, guard that with your heart. Don't get complacent. Right? We get cocky. I can handle this. Nah, you're going to die. Yeah, it doesn't take long. It does not take long. You got to guard your heart. Guard your heart above all else. This is a great proverb. I could preach volumes out of this passage right here. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Your heart is going to say where you go. How? We've been talking all along. Your heart is what guides the rest of you. If your heart is evil, you're going to do evil. Huh? What you're thinking. Exactly. Guard that. We talked about it from last week, from Romans. Don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We got to change the way we think about things. When I was a youth pastor, and then in talking with some of the guys at New Creation and stuff, I would hear them talk about the good old times they had while they were on drugs. And as soon as they start talking like that, I know they're headed back. I know. You're going to go back. Yeah, sooner or later. Because, like, what does the Psalm say? Like a dog returning to his vomit. Which is such a lovely picture. No, it's just gross.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but they do it. Your heart has got to be kept from those things. And if you let your heart go wrong, the rest of you is going to go wrong. Keep your heart pure. Guard yourself. Okay? Look, you can get rid of the internet, but you still have TV. You can smash your TV set, but you still have books and magazines and billboards and other people. There's no way you're going to escape all temptation. There's just no way. In the 4th century, a man named Andrew tried to do just that. Listen to this. In order to escape the temptations of immorality, he became a hermit and lived alone in the Egyptian desert for more than 30 years. He's like, you know what? I'm too tempted by the things that are going on here. I got to go live in the desert. He lived in the desert by himself for 30 years. Toward the end of his life, he wrote that even after 30 years in the desert, he still struggled with lustful thoughts. The same ones that drove him there in the first place. Okay. Look, we can bring you up here to the mountains. We can put you in a nice house up there and keep you. But nothing changes in your heart unless your heart changes. We've had guys go out here and go back and do the exact same things they did the first time, as soon as they got out of here. Why? Their heart never changed. And it breaks my heart. Understand, temptation is a matter of the heart, not just a matter of our external surroundings. We blame it on stuff. We blame it on things, right? Well, Pastor, I was just, there's so much sin out there, and it just got to me. Come on. If you sin, it's because you want to. That's what the book of James tells us. We sin when we're led away by our lusts and desires. I got news for you. If every time you had a lustful thought, I came along with a pair of shears and chopped off a bit of your pinky, and chopped off a little bit more, and then eventually started the next finger every time you had a lustful thought, you know what? It'd be a lot easier to control your lustful thoughts. Because eventually it would hurt. Or you just like, how old are you? I'm 5. Okay. You would change. Because if it caused you pain right away, you could do it. That's that whole idea of those guys, they want to quit smoking, so they wear a rubber band around their wrist. And they would snap the rubber band every time they wanted to smoke. For some people, that really works. Because they associate that pain with that action. It's one of the reasons you spank kids. And I don't mean beat them. I mean put your hand on their butt and let them know that's not acceptable. You want them to understand that if they do something wrong, there are consequences. And the kids that are always the hardest to deal with, as a teacher, as a pastor, are the kids whose parents never taught them that there are consequences. We don't tell Bobby no. Well, Bobby's going to end up a serial killer. No. I've seen the results of these kids. I've watched them. They grow up and their parents never tell them no, never discipline them. Those kids end up wild because they never understand that there are consequences to their actions. In order to deal with temptation, you need to deal with your heart. Pure and simple. It's not a question of cutting off your hand or gouging out your eyes or making yourself a eunuch. It's none of that. None of that's going to change the lust that's in your heart, the sin that's in your heart. You got to deal with your heart. When David sinned, committed adultery, and then murder, the Old Testament, David was restless one night, and he looks across out of the palace, and there's this woman named Bathsheba. She's taking a bath on her roof. And David looked at her and said, "Oh, baby, I got to have her." So he commits adultery with her. Well, then she ends up pregnant. And her husband, Uriah, is off on the war. So he makes a special effort to bring Uriah back and says, "Hey, you've done so good out on the war in the battle that I want you to be able to spend the night with your lovely wife," because he's trying to cover up his sin. But Uriah is such an upright guy. He sleeps on the doorstep of his house that night because he said, "It's not fair for me to go in and enjoy my wife when all my brothers are fighting on the battlefield and dying." So what does David do? Because now he's about to be exposed. David sends him out to battle, and he tells everybody, "All right, get Uriah at the head of the battle, and then everybody withdraw." And they left him out there to get killed by the enemy, and he dies. And then the prophet Nathan comes to David in one of the most chilling verses in the Bible. Nathan tells David the story about a guy who he's a shepherd, and he has all these sheep. And there's this one little guy over here, he's got one little sheep, and the shepherd wanted that other mean guy wanted his one little sheep, so he went over and he took it, and he killed the guy. And David gets ticked. He says, "You tell me who that man is, we will put that man to death. You tell me who he is, we will get that man." And Nathan looked at him and said, "You are the man." That's exactly what David did. You got all these wives, all these concubines over here, and because you wanted this one woman, you had a good man killed. And David was crushed. And in Psalm 51:10, he says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me." What did he ask for? A clean heart. Give me a clean heart, God. It all starts in our heart. Every sin you do starts inside. Every sin I do starts inside. In order for us to break sin's stronghold, we must experience a change of heart. By eliminating the sources of all the external stimulation and temptation, it gives you a chance to work on what's really important, and that's your heart. You see the difference? Getting rid of all the, cutting it out and looking away, that's all good. But the change of heart is what really wins the battle. Those are all good steps. That's the planning that you need. But it's changing your heart that wins the battle. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about Matthew 5:8. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. Remember, we said that the word pure here means purged or cleansed. God blesses those whose hearts are purged of all their sin, who are cleansed of all their temptation. That's the work that Jesus performs in your life. Your heart can become so pure that dating isn't a problem. The only woman that I didn't date and either try to sleep with or sleep with before I got married is my wife. And when she walked down that aisle wearing a white dress, I knew that it meant that she was pure because I hadn't done that with her yet. And it meant something to me. It meant something in my heart. It's worth it, guys. It's worth it to be pure. It's worth it to have our hearts right with God. Your heart can become so pure that surfing the internet isn't a problem. Or working with an attractive member of the opposite sex isn't a problem. Or hanging out, or at least being around some of those friends isn't a problem. Your heart is so pure that you can reach them for Christ instead of them pulling you down. But it starts with a pure heart. So you got to make sure your life is 100% on track. And then when you feel that temptation, walk away. Jesus wants to purify your heart. But in order for him to do this, you've got to do your part. This is key. Jesus is not going to make you be good. He's just not. But he won't let the devil make you be bad either. When we purify our heart, we do our part. Jesus says, I'll help you purify your heart. I'll help you take care of that, but you've got to do your part. You've got to cut all this stuff out of your life. You've got to quit exposing yourself to all this stuff that's hurting you. Like what Romans 6:14 says, sin is no longer your master. For you no longer live under the requirements of the law. Instead, you live under the freedom of God's grace. What God is calling you to here is not a life that's no fun, that's devoid of all happiness or drudgery. In fact, it's the opposite. What God's calling you to here is a life that is happy, a life that is full of joy, that doesn't have all the stuff that knocks you down and takes your feet out from under you. Peaceful. Peaceful. That's a great word for it. Yeah. Peaceful. That's the life God wants us to have. God created us to be victorious over sin, even the biggest one of all, the sin that has your name on it. If I were to ask each one of you to confess your sins, and I'm not gonna, because I don't want to know, and I'm not going to tell you mine, but if I were to ask each one of you, every one of you would have a different sin. Now, some there, if I asked you to give me a list, there would be some overlap. But you know what? We've all got different sins. We've all got things that chunk us up more than anything else. And it says here, look, if we take these steps to purify our heart, God will help us with all that. God's not calling you to a life of drudgery. Just a few weeks ago, we talked about it. What did it say? It said, I came that they would have life and life more abundant. I came that they would have life and then even a better life. Some of you guys are settling for life, not the better life. The better life comes when our hearts are pure and God is be able to bless us and be able to use us and do great things in us. So, 3 steps. First of all, look away. Cut it out and guard your heart. Guys, this is so simple a process. There's nothing here earth-shaking. But it's going to take discipline. You're going to have to do it. And if you don't do it, that's the problem you're going to have. Make sense? All right, let's pray. God, thanks. Thank you for your love. God, you're so good to us. And Lord, I pray that you would open our hearts to do these things. God, it's so easy, and yet it seems like we struggle with it. God, you want us to be better. You want us to be blessed. You want us to have that abundant life. But God, we've got to do our part. So I thank you, Father, for your grace, for your mercy, for the love that you have for us. God, you've called us to things that are tough, but you've also told us you'd give us the strength to do it. So right now, guys, just take a minute and say, okay, God, all right, this is what you're asking of me. Help me do it. Give me strength. Help me do this, God. If you really want to, the power that you need to do it is there. But you got to want to. All right? Father, thanks. Bless us now, God. Move in our lives. God, I pray that you'll do great things in us. Thanks, Father. Thanks. In your name, amen. All right. Love you guys.